Hi, still here from Joe's Country Junction. I am here today. I'm in my kitchen. I have the dogs here, so we'll probably be interrupted by the dogs, but I'm getting a video done. It's early July of 2023 as I film this, and I need to head out and go pick up some foster dogs pretty quick here and help with some dogs that are coming in. But I wanted to quick shoot a video because I've had a viewer, I think it's Mama Wolf, who has been asking for me to try to show her how I actually use shirt fabric once I have it cut up. So I'm going to work on doing that with you today. I do have a video that shows you how to take a shirt and cut it down so that you only have fabric. So I'm not going to do that again today, but we will put a link to that video in the description box down below. And if you don't know where to find that, there should be an arrow button below this video that, you know, like a V, and the V, if you hit the V, then that will take you down to the description box below. And if you don't know how to, if you have trouble finding that there, you can always go to YouTube, type in Joe's Country Junction, and you will see all of the videos that I've done. You can find all of the videos that I've done there. And I've done a couple on shirts. So if you're interested in using shirts, you might want to check that out. Before, part of the interest in me doing this video sparked because I have recently finished up this quilt. And here it is. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it very well because I got this big stack of other quilts here, but you'll get the idea. This is my Oregon or Bust quilt. This was made entirely from shirts. And anytime after I do a video with, or after I do a project with shirts, I get a lot of people interested in knowing how I work with shirts and how I do that. So it really wasn't a surprise to me that somebody had asked a question about using shirts. And I know a lot of people will write and comment to me, well, a shirt is $6 where I'm at, so no, I'm not going to make quilts with shirts. And you certainly don't have to. You certainly don't need to. You can make any of these quilts that I'm showing you with fabric as well. Let me think, what else? I was super lucky. We used to have thrift stores in our area that would have $2 and $3 bag sales, and you could stuff as many shirts as you wanted into the bag. And I got a lot of my shirts that way. Every time I went, I would buy all of the cotton shirts that they had. I only use 100% cotton shirts when I do it. Some of them are still a little bit different. I tend to not use the woven fabrics. I'm like the homespunny woven kind of fabrics when I pick shirts. I don't mind if some have a sheen and some don't, because even though some are 100% cotton, somehow they get a sheen on them. I do use the brushed cotton with the regular. A lot of people have asked me too, well, if you make a quilt out of shirts, it's not going to last. And I am going to nix that one immediately, because this was one of the first quilts that I ever made with shirts. And I made this, I think over 10 years ago. And I used shirts for the front, and I used a sheet for the back. This quilt is the family favorite quilt. It's also, it's out in my living room. My grandkids use it to make blanket houses all the time. I use it for picnics and things like that. I throw this one out on the lawn and lay the babies out on the lawn, so they can be outside with us. And then when the quilt comes in, I typically wash it after it's been in. So it gets a lot of wash, it gets a lot of wear, and it's been doing that for over 10 years, and the quilt is still in very good shape. It's faded like any fabric would be, but the quilt is in very good shape. So I don't want you to think that if you make a quilt from shirts that it is going to detour the quality of the quilt. because it just really won't. I'm sure many of you have a husband or a significant other or person in your life, or you yourself have a quilt that you made, or you have a shirt that you've worn and worn and worn, and your shirt is 10 years old, but your shirt is still in good shape. I'll tell you a little story here. My husband dated a gal, and for Christmas she gave him a shirt. It was a 100% cotton shirt. He wore that shirt. I think we were married for 10 years and he still had that shirt. And I finally said to him, I said, would you mind getting rid of that shirt? And he said, well, why? I said, well, your old girlfriend gave that to you and it just feels awkward. So would you just get rid of the shirt? And so he did. But a shirt can last 10 years. And so, of course, a quilt can last over 10 years, even if it's made from shirts. One of my favorite ones that I've ever made from shirts is probably this quilt. This is rectangle wrangle, and this is a Bonnie Hunter pattern, just like the Oregon or bust, the first one I showed you is. If you go on my blog, joescountryjunction.com, and you type in rectangle wrangle, you can see many more pictures of this quilt done. It's just an absolute favorite of mine. I loved making it. I had such fun making it. And I want to do a huge shout out to Bonnie Hunter of Quiltville, as she's the one that got me started on making quilts from shirts. The ones that I've just showed you here have been all from this book that I've showed you so far. Well, I liked making quilts from shirts enough that I went on and I designed one of my own quilts from shirts, and this one, being we're at the beginning of July, is a favorite of mine as well. This one's a patriotic flag quilt. You can see over here is, blue, and then the rest of the quilt is the red and white stripes. So all of these have been made from shirts. And as often as I can, if I use shirt fabric for the front, I try to use a sheet for the back. I try to find a 100% cotton sheet and use that for the back. And I've been pretty lucky. Like here, my flag one I just showed you, this was a sheet I found. I think it was actually a duvet cover, and then I used that for the back. And the reason why I try to do that is because then the quilt will feel instantly soft. Do you know how a quilt feels after you've washed it, like, I don't know, 30 times? And it just feels like it's, I don't know. I just love the feel of a quilt that feels like it's your very old best friend. And if you make a quilt from shirts and you use a duvet cover or a sheet for the back, it instantly feels just like that, even after just one washing. And I love, love, love that. So I do recommend Bonnie's book if you're interested in shirts. And I'll put a link for that below as well. And I actually lost my original copy, and I went and bought another one, and then later I found my other one. So I actually have 2 copies of that, and I thought about giving one away, and then I just decided, nope, I love the book too much. I'm not gonna give it away. So the question that I got from the viewer was that she wanted to know, once she gets a sleeve off, what is she supposed to do? How is she supposed to find the straight of the grain? Well, I'm going to take my sleeve off here first. Oh, and I probably should have put a new rotary cutter blade in. You'll have to bear with me. It seems like every time I go to cut on camera, I should have gotten a new rotary cutter blade. So I'm getting a sleeve off here. And first off, I want to tell you that when you're making a quilt from shirts, it's usually not like a big heirloom quilt. And yes, you want to find the straight of the grain, but if it's not exactly right on the thread, it's totally okay. It's going to be just fine. So I'm going to grab this little gusset out of here. I think that's what you call this little piece right here. I don't know, is that the gusset? I don't know what that is. So now in just a short while we have a piece of fabric, and this is how our piece of fabric looks. One thing when you use shirts, sometimes you want to decide, depending on how you're cutting something out, do you want straight line, do you want the lines going this way, or do you want the lines going this way? Because this shirt was obviously a striped shirt. So I make some of those kind of decisions. Oftentimes I would take this and I'm going to iron this, and I actually am going to do that right now. I have my iron right over here. If I can move this stack of quilts a little bit, just going to iron the edge. Sorry, I'm off camera a little bit. Yeah. I plugged the iron in, anticipating that might be a problem. I'm not going to iron the whole thing. It's close enough. So sometimes if you want to find the straight of the grain, what you can do is take your rotary cutter, make a little slit, and rip. And now this is your straight of the grain, because it ripped, and that's how it ripped, and you can do that. That's one way that I find the straight of the grain. And then you can fold the shirt this way, and then you can use that as your guideline, and you can cut. So you could come across here and you could cut, well, I'd trim off the edge first, so you're not dealing with that, like this. And then I would, let's say we're gonna cut an 1.5 inch strip, and I would just cut like this. And the problem with using shirts and a sleeve is oftentimes the angle of the sleeve. Oh, there go the dogs, they're playing. The angle of the sleeve over here gives you some junk. But if you watch my video showing how I do improv piecing, sorry about the dogs. Hey girls, Rosie, hey. I save a lot of these pieces and use them for that improv quilting that I do. You can check out my other videos. I made a shirt for my grandson Anders, and you can see how I use these pieces. So I save all of these pieces. I would probably go like this and cut this ick off and then just keep this much, excuse me, of it. And that would be what I use for making that quilt. I'd also take this cuff apart and use the good piece of the cuff for that quilt as well. And so here I have an 1.5 inch piece that I can use to make a quilt. And then after that, I can take my sleeve and I'll go on the side here, and I can just cut strips right along here like this. I have it folded in half, and it's easy to stay on the grain because all you do is line up the stripes. And if you have the stripes lined up, then you can see down here, I folded it in half, and these stripes are lining up with these stripes, so that keeps you straight of the grain, and you don't have to worry about that divot or crease that you sometimes get in the fold when you cut regular fabric. So that's how one way that I do and follow for straight of the grain is I make a rip and then I cut after the rip, and that makes it pretty easy. Sometimes if you have a front of a shirt that has a pocket, this shirt actually doesn't have a pocket, but it has this little polo player, then I cut the pocket off and just use the lower half of the shirt. These big back pieces, you can do a lot. A lot of people will say something about how expensive a shirt is, and they can be expensive at your thrift stores, but also there's quite a lot of fabric in this one, especially if you get a large or an extra large shirt. And I got a 4X one time, and it was like, man, that was a gold mine of fabric. I do have a pretty extensive collection of fabric now because I've been doing this for a while. But also, I still pick up shirts that are unusual colors. Orange is an unusual color, pink and purple, yellow, red. Finding blue ones is pretty easy. And see, so this is how big a piece is from the back. We've got a couple. So if you want to find the straight of the grain this way, being its lines, I fold it in half, and I line up a line to a line along the edge, and then I smooth it out, and then I watch this edge along the top here, right along here, to make sure that the line stays straight. And if that line is straight, that's about as close as I can get to the straight of the grain with using the shirt. So I can do both things. I can line up the lines at the raw edge, and I can make sure that the line at the folded edge is straight. And that's another way that I can work to get the straight of the grain. And it works for me. I'm not a person who is super, super picky. You can see that even my non-pickiness has led me to make some pretty nice looking quilts. So part of making a quilt from shirts is just to dive in and do it. I don't overthink it. Don't freak out about straight of the grain. I know it's something that you want, and it's something we all desire. And if you just follow these little tips that I gave, that you either rip or that you follow the line across the top to make sure that an even amount, okay, you can kind of see here. You just need to line up the stripe so that the stripe is straight. And then you need to put that on your cutting board like you would any other project, and you need to make sure it's straight there. And then once you start cutting, your line will be straight. And if it's not perfect, it's totally okay. You're not gonna see that in the big picture of the quilt. You're gonna see the pretty quilt. I can guarantee you 100% that every piece that I make in all of those quilts is not exactly on the straight of the grain. And I'm totally okay with that. You're still gonna have a beautiful quilt. I think this is something that sometimes prevents people from trying to quilt, is having a little anxiety about wanting it to be perfect. And it's okay if it's not exactly perfect. No one else is gonna see that in the large picture of the quilt. I'm gonna pull this back out again. And especially if you're making a busier quilt like this, you can't tell if my pieces are on the straight of the grain or not. In general, yeah, they look good because you can see this block that the lines look like they're going straight. But some of that can even get off by you shifting the piece while you're sewing it just a little bit one way or the other. So I highly recommend trying to not get too hung up on it. As far as plaids, you can match the plaid lines just like we're matching the stripe lines. You can make sure that you can rip the edge like I rip the edge when you're doing plaids. You can also match the plaid when you fold it over to cut it. So like here I have it folded over to cut. You can come down when you match them together. Sometimes when I fold, I leave the top piece just a little bit, like an inch away from the bottom piece, so that I can see, and along here I'll match the plaid. Maybe if I show it to you this way, you can see, like if I did this and cut this direction, you can see right here that I would be wanting to match the lines so that the lines are straight along here, and that would give me the straight of the grain as long as I have it folded correctly. That works with plaids too. I think the biggest thing I want to tell you is don't be afraid to try. If you don't try, that's where you failed. If you try and it's not perfect, you just didn't do it perfect, but you didn't fail. So don't be nervous about it. Just jump in and give it a try. If you have more questions about it, you can ask me more questions about it. Again, this was the book that I got the patterns from for the quilt that I just showed you, and a couple of the other quilts. The first quilt I showed you, that was the one quilt I showed you that was green. That's the family favorite. And my rectangle wrangle quilt, that was all in here as well. This is a great book if you want to do some projects with shirts. I have made all but three of the quilts from the book, and I think I'm going to try to tackle it and finish the other 3 quilts, and then I'll have done all of the quilts from the book. I think that's kind of fun. One of the next quilts that I plan to make is this one, and that is Goose in the Puddle. So if you want to sew along with me, if you want to start collecting fabrics, you're sure welcome to. This original one is done in red, white, and blues, and I'll be making it in red, white, and blue as well. So start collecting and we can sew along together. I'm sure in the future that will be a Sew with Joe project, because I love doing Sew with Joe's. It feels like I gotta have some company, and I know many of you have said that you enjoy them as well. So that's what I have to tell you about shirts and how to get the straight of the grain. And I think the biggest thing is don't worry, it'll be okay, and just do your best. And you can do that. So I'll catch you later. I'm off to go rescue some dogs. Bye.